Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we are talking about the 3 stages of investing in property. Now, this is very exciting because it comes from our upcoming book, Wealth Plan, which is being released late October, and we're very excited about it. Now, this book, the whole premise of it is about how do you use property over your lifetime to set yourself up to have an income for life. And the subtitle of the book is How to Invest in New Zealand Property and Retire on Real Estate. Now, as part of that, we have divided up your life stages into 3 distinct parts. Andrew, what are they?
They are at the starting blocks, starting out, running the race, and then there's crossing the finish line. And today we're going to go through all 3 stages and talk about what they entail. And the book contains all the philosophies and tactics that we talk about in the show, but puts them in a clear, structured order.
Which is quite unusual for us, being clear and structured. Now, what I want to say as well is these have evolved quite a lot. So we actually first introduced this concept back in episode 530, and we'd given them different names at that point.
What did we call them then?
They were planters, growers,
yeah.
and harvesters. And we thought we were geniuses, would come up with this great analogy, and then we realised that...
We stole them.
Well, the Barefoot Investor has exactly the same ones, and we must have thought we'd come up with them, but we hadn't. But actually, the really good thing is that, A, we've renamed them, so now we've got a running the race sort of theme, but also we've added a lot more to it, and I actually think it's become a lot better. So let me tell you about what happens when you're at the starting blocks. Well, this is where you either don't own any property yet, or you own your first property, which could either be an investment property or your own home, but you're not yet ready to purchase that second property. Because as soon as you purchase that second property, you become running the race. So I'll actually tell you, Andrew, I was messaging a guy called Billy over the weekend on Instagram, and he was looking to buy his first home. Now, he doesn't own any property yet, so I was able to say to him, sweet, you are at the starting blocks. Now, what is the goal of this stage for somebody like Billy? Well, it's to buy your first property and then build enough equity that you can purchase that second property. In his case, I was saying to Billy, you need to buy your first home, then you've got to build the equity so that you're able to buy your first investment property. And once you've got enough equity, not once you've actually bought your first investment property, once you've got enough equity, that's when you can start running the race. So what are the main steps that you actually have to do here? Well, first of all, you've got to buy your first property, and then you've got 2 options to build the equity. You can either pay down your mortgage aggressively, and in the book we call that attack that mortgage, or you can renovate the property to add value. Now, Andrew, if those are the 3 key steps, buying your first property and either paying down your mortgage aggressively or renovating to add value, what are some of the concepts that listeners will be familiar with if they've listened to all 1,000 plus episodes, and how do they fit in with these steps?
Okay, well, the first thing is kind of fast 5, so the 5 deposit sources you can use to actually put together your money to buy your first home. So episode 930 does that. That's for buying.
Yep, so that's when you buy your first home, how to build your deposit.
Yep. Then there's attacking the mortgage. So we've done an episode number 855, which is the mortgage buster strategy, which is paying down your mortgage as quickly as possible using revolving credit to make lump sum payments. And then, of course, there's adding value to your home, which we use cash flow hacking usually, and that's anything we've put out with ILSA.
And what we're trying to demonstrate here really is that the book fits so well with the podcast. You know, we've developed these ideas over the last 3 years, and we've made up these different systems based on what we know works. And this book kind of collects them together and puts them in that structure. So once we've built up that equity, Andrew, how do we move into running the race, and what happens there? Okay,
so running the race, where you're at is you're financially ready to buy your second property. It's either going to be your first or second investment property, depending if you're owner-occupier buying your first investment or you're a rent-vestor like Ed McKnight. So what's going to happen at this stage? Well, you're probably going to start by creating a wealth plan. So that's working out exactly how many assets you're going to need and what your wealth gap actually is. And that's such a key part of it, because you don't just want to go out and buy properties. You need to actually have a plan in place for how many and what type of properties and all those kind of things. And in the book, we call this setting the length of your race, because it's not that you're racing against someone else. It's not an Ed and Andrew versus race. If it was, I'd win. In any type of race. You're racing against yourself and the clock, let's face it, because there's only a certain amount of work life for anyone that they've got. So it's a time trial. You want to build a portfolio of growth properties and some yield to close your wealth gap. And then you need to hold on and keep running, keep that stamina going so that you can build your wealth out of your property.
So those are the kinds of things that happen in that running the race section. But what are the three main steps that we say people need to work through?
Okay, first one is acquire the first investment property, or the second if you're a rent investor. Then you need to set that property up for success and then get ready to expand your portfolio and do it all again.
So we think of that as a bit of a cycle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you do this until you build up enough assets that you can eventually live off that property portfolio.
And actually, I forgot to mention, I'm going to share, for you guys watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull up my screen and just share what the book looks like. I'll do that at the end of the episode, so you've got an incentive to stick around to the end. Now, what are some of the key concepts that we've talked about on the show that line up with those three steps of acquiring an investment property, setting that property up for success, and then expanding further? Well, in terms of acquiring a property, and this is the meaty part of the book, we talk about choosing a goal. So is it passive income? Is it retirement based on wealth plan, which you hear about every case study Sunday? We talk about wealth wheels in terms of buying a couple of growth and a yield property. We talked about that in episode 556. We talk about the 8 principles of finding high capital growth properties. That was episode 720. And of course, we talk about the return on investment method, which we've talked about ad nauseum on the show all of the time. When you set your properties up for success, we talk about the right rent system, which we've talked about on YouTube, but actually has not been a podcast, I recently realized. And then also when you come to getting ready to expand your portfolio, that's where we have a whole appendix on the 7 strategies to master your mortgage, which is really exciting. We talked about that in the April webinar. Okay, fine. So what have we done so far? We've gotten out of the starting blocks. We're now running the race, buying lots of properties in order to try and grow our wealth. Then it comes to the fun part, stage 3, which is?
Crossing the finish line. This is where you can actually enjoy your wealth. So where you're at, you've got all the assets that you need for your wealth gap, and you've been investing in property for a long time, so you've got your asset base established. So the goal now is to convert this wealth into a passive income or enough of a liquid asset that you can spend that in retirement. So you've got to choose your strategy. You either need to choose the nest egg strategy, which is when you're going to sell down your properties, pay off the debt, invest in a low-risk fund, and spend that money over time until you die. Or the golden goose strategy.
Until you die, just like that. Until you die. Oh, okay. What a pleasant way to start our Monday morning, since that's when this episode's being released.
Or the golden goose strategy, where you sell off all your properties, you pay off the debt again, but you use the cash to buy high-yielding properties that provide an income for life, and you never die.
Well, in that case, again, we've got the concepts from the show that relate back. So we've talked a lot recently about the nest egg and the golden goose strategy, both in the case study Sunday episodes, but also episode 967. That's about choosing your strategy. Of course, the next thing you do in crossing the finish line is selling those properties down. And I don't think we've got any specific episodes about that. Well, I mean, we've done it, we've talked about it on the show, but it's not like I've given it a cool name, which maybe sounds like I should have actually, like the 7 secrets to sell. But of course, Barkeeper's Friend, which we mentioned a lot on the show, that gets a special mention. That company better not go out of business, because
they need to have like a discount code. Use Opus for your 5% off.
And then the final part, buy high yielding properties. If you are following the golden goose, that comes back to episode 721. We talked about the 5 principles of finding those high yield properties. So you might be wondering, well, does that mean that all of the info's on the podcast? Yes, it is. And that's the beauty of this book. The true beauty of this book is it's actually everything we have learned and everything we've shared over the last 3 years on this podcast, but then put in a logical order where you know, how do I apply that information to my situation based on the stage you are in? So, Andrew, talk to us a little bit about which stage are you in within your property investment journey in terms of how we define it here, and then I'll talk about mine, just so people, again, can figure out how these stages work.
So I'm definitely running the race. I'm still acquiring properties. I'm still buying pretty much exclusively for growth.
But what's interesting is I am also running the race, because building up a portfolio, but you would be further along in your journey. In fact, I would say you're probably at the stage where if you wanted to, you probably could cross the finish line, retire, and just live off rental income. But you've got somebody, podcast host, fellow podcast host who won't let you do that.
Burn them all down if I tried to.
No, you don't need that.
I'd
frame you for insurance fraud. I'd put on a cap or something, dress up as Andrew Nicol, burn your houses down.
Andrew Nicol would never be caught wearing a cap, wandering around, setting fires to houses. But
That's what you'd want the insurance company to think. But my point is that even though you could cross the finish line, you're not there yet because you're still moving towards your goal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then I'm very similar, except much earlier in my journey. Whereas if I think about somebody who's doesn't own a property, Billy we talked about, he's at the starting blocks. Similarly, we've had investors that we've dealt with for many, many years, and I think you know the couple I'm thinking about right now, who built up a portfolio of about 5 properties, sold them down, and have invested in commercial property now. And in fact, they're in the book as well. They're crossing the finish line because even though they're, I think between 55 and 60, I think it is. Actually, I think they're early 50s. Even though they're early 50s, they have built up enough assets where they now own a commercial property that just pays them rent and they can live off that. They can give up work. And so they're crossing the finish line, even though they're not at the traditional retirement age. And so the great thing about these 3 stages is it allows you to figure out, well, where am I right now and what are the next steps that I need to do? Am I at the starting blocks? Am I running the race or am I crossing the finish line? Now, Andrew, everybody wants to know, just before we pull up the book and show it to everybody and flick through. The big reveal. When is the book coming out?
Mid-October is when we're hoping it's going to be in shelves on time for Christmas. So if you're a friend of mine, don't expect anything from me other than a book for Christmas. And we're planning to do a big book tour around early November. So Ed and I are going to hit the road. Currently, the plan is 5 cities: Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Queenstown, Napier, but we may add on a bonus couple of rounds.
No, don't say that, because then everybody's going to message
if someone wants us in Sydney...
No, everybody wanted us in Gore. And
no, absolutely not. We're not going to Gore.
Sorry, everybody from Southland. But what I want to do now for everybody on the YouTube is just quickly, and I'm sorry for everybody on the podcast, I just want to briefly flick through and show you some of the pages because this is a beautifully designed book.
I'm very glad that Ed has, so Ed has been in charge of illustration and did make me look about 20 years older than him when the first draft came out. I know what he's up to.
Let me flick through just so for everybody, because you had some massive wrinkles on there.
I had some massive wrinkles.
Unfortunately, now look at that. It's like you've had Botox.
Well, I have had Botox.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I need to get some and then have mine redrawn just so that I look younger as well.
You made yourself look like Clark Kent, and I know exactly what you're up to.
Mate,
look how square that jaw is. You look like a movie star. It's bullshit. I can't say that. It's bollocks.
Some would say a Clark Kent vibe. A Clark Kent. Well, look, we're going to wrap it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really does help us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you want to invest in property, if you're ready to start running that race, then it's time to come in for a portfolio planning session. Easy way to sign up for that. Text the word PLAN to 55522. We'll be in touch, see if it's the right fit. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
And we're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.